Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. One of the things I like about science fiction in general, and science fiction games in particular, is the ability to consider the unlimited possibilities of future and alternative human civilization. How we might have developed entirely different if things had gone a little differently, or how things would develop on some strange new location under strange new considerations, which is why I was both very interested and profoundly frustrated at the most recent Inside Star Citizen on building interiors. Because when somebody talks about how they're engaging in unbounded blue sky ideation, the frustrating thing isn't the ideas that they come up with, but the unthinking presumptions that prevented a whole range of even more exciting possibilities, leaving what they did come up with seeming kind of pedestrian. So what I'm talking about is this. It is the presumption that all these kinds of spaces have to be in a skyscraper. No real thought given to that at all, just presumed. No consideration of any other possibility other than a skyscraper. And CIG has had this myopic obsession with skyscrapers all along. But skyscrapers are futuristic, you say. Yeah, if this is 1890 in Chicago and you're working for Burnham and Root, sure, the new innovations of structural iron frames and Otis safe attraction elevator make the sky seem the limit. But the current skyline of, say, New York isn't some sort of modern marvel of efficiency, but a horrible, inefficient system created by decisions 2 centuries ago. Yet we are supposed to believe that it is the automatic default urban topology centuries in the future on entirely different planets with entirely different conditions, entirely different societies, and even entirely different species. So much opportunity for real imagination not taken advantage of. Yet that is what we have. First we had ArcCorp, which was supposedly based on hyper-efficient Xeon city planning concepts. Wow, a chance to imagine how a whole different species might solve the urban planning challenge. And what do we get? Endless skyscrapers, plus a giant donut of a convention center for some reason. And skyscrapers are horribly inefficient, so they in no way correspond to the description of Xeon city planning. Anyway, so let me talk a little about how skyscrapers are inefficient. Imagine that you are on the 80th floor of one skyscraper and you need to get to the 80th floor of the skyscraper next to it. Maybe 100 meters total. Travel all the way down to the first floor, across the street, and then all the way up to the 80th floor. Say 15 minutes total to walk 100 meters. And all that is reflected in another level of inefficiency. Look at the floor plan of the new One World Trade Center. Look how much of the ground floor must be given over to elevators. Nothing but elevators and stairs. And this really doesn't get that much better on the upper floors either. Build skyscrapers as tall as some of this concept art, and there wouldn't be room for anything at all on the lower level but elevators. So why are skyscrapers so prevalent in American skylines? Because of a set of street grids and property parcels, in the case of New York, laid out in 1811, which created parcels based on a cottage and a little bit of land for a few animals or a garden. So you have these completely uncoordinated developments of small square parcels, which, when forced to accommodate higher densities, are forced to become independent, uncoordinated skyscrapers. And there is another level of inefficiency that I will get to in a moment. After ArcCorp, we had Hurston, and at Lorville we had this huge, hulking beast sitting back on its haunches, staring down at its domain, a picture-perfect reflection of the societal reality of the city. Except that now, as we added to, that image is cluttered with skyscrapers because apparently the only thing we can imagine adding to a city is more skyscrapers, even though such a chaos of individual initiatives is completely contrary to what Lorville is. But everything apparently must, be a skyscraper. And then we get New Babbitt. When it was initially described, it was a city of domes featuring award-winning gardens. Dome cities were a staple of science fiction in unforgiving environments. Bucky Fuller would be proud. In 1960, R. Buckminster Fuller proposed putting a 3-kilometer dome over Midtown Manhattan. He explained that the surface area of the dome was less than the surface area of all those little fins and needles of buildings, and thus it would be easier and cheaper to heat and cool the entire dome than those buildings. He also estimated that the dome would pay for itself just with the savings in snow removal costs from the streets. Now, what a perfect solution for an even far more hostile environment up in New Babbage, for all those wonderful gardens to live under. But what we got instead was a few small domes in the shopping center, and the rest of the city's huge clusters, yet again, of skyscrapers like so many corporate phalluses. Except, of course, for the one building that instead looks like a giant vagina. So the whole city looks like a sea of inadequately sized phalluses unsuccessfully trying to get the attention of one vagina. Maybe that was supposed to be a metaphor for Friday night at Wally's. But honestly, it is not at all how anybody would design a city from scratch subjected to constant blasting by sub-zero winds. Then, finally, we get to Hurston, and freed from the ground and property lines, some true imagination started to come forth, with the garden platforms and rings, leaving aside the extreme inadvisability of having everyone's life dependent on a perpetual functioning system of mechanical thrust, rather than, neutral buoyancy. But then, of course, they had to stick skyscraper towers on top of those platforms, because, well, of course. Never mind, that throws off the center of gravity versus the center of air resistance, so if those thrusters on the platforms would fail, it would first flip over and send everybody outside catapulting away to fall to their painful crushing death before doing the same for the platform itself and everybody on it. But hey, aren't skyscrapers cool? So I was frustrated, but not really surprised, when the graphic unquestionably presumed that, hey, this is a city, we must be putting these things in a skyscraper, but recognized that rather than being some sort of blue sky imagination, it is prosaic and limited, really limited. Now, since the philosophy of this channel is to never complain without suggesting how to do something better, I clearly have been critical here. I should suggest at least a place to start when imagining other possibilities. I already mentioned dome cities, a staple of science fiction, but I'll also point out that once you are inside the dome, your environment is freed from having to worry about keeping warm or cold or rainproof, etc., and you can be really free-form about the interiors. Another frequent science fiction tropes are underground cities, but let me offer something broader and even more specific. Paolo Soleri was an architect who theorized about how to apply natural forms to the scale and scope of huge cities that would be efficient and sustainable. He called these arcologies. In 1973, he published Arcology, The City in the Image of Man, with many richly detailed examples in the second half of the book. Now, some of these illustrations take a lot of thought to decode, as they are collages, combining different views into a single image to give an overall impression. For example, the left and right might be different floors of the same building or a cross-section imposed over a partial floor plan, and some of the background tints are other buildings in the book. Since the idea is to give design ideas and not actually be able to build something, that's okay, but as I said, it takes a fair deal of decoding, even by a professional. So, note that the scale of these megastructures are huge, often many kilometers wide and tall. So these are structures rivaling Hurston Tower in their dominance and being able to be seen from orbit. The essential concept of arcology was that the cities are huge structures of honeycombs, where instead of owning your land, you would purchase or lease a block of space in the surface of the megastructure, and then be able to build out any sort of home you wanted to inside of it. So it actually would fit well with the rest of the interiors that were presented in the ISC episode. Like his mentor, Frank Lloyd Wright, Soleri's arcology designs were very specific and integrated with their settings. So there are floating cities, cities in cliff faces, cities both in and crossing a canyon, cities built into a dam face. The designs were also intended to take advantage of solar angles, climate, and other natural factors in ways that the let's make a whole bunch of skyscrapers thinking is lacking in. So now, just to be clear, I'm not saying build these specifically. That wouldn't be fair or legal, nor am I holding up Soleri as some sort of paragon, either professionally and certainly not personally. What I am saying is that there are all sorts of different ways at looking at cities as they might be in the future on entirely new planets and entirely new societies, other than a highly efficient 1890s Earth building form driven by 1690s Earth land use policies that was already considered outdated by the best urban design theorists of the 1990s, and presuming that they are still going to predominate on entirely new planets in the 30th century, that's lead sky, not blue sky. Now for an update on our giveaways. We have 2 ship giveaways and 1 skill contest. The first is the 10,000 subscriber thank you for the LTI Hull C, the colossal cargo container carrying craft, to be given away when the C becomes flyable sometime this year. And then there is the big giveaway for the winner's choice of either the Galaxy Complete, the massive modular mining moving medical machine, or the brand new big box bargain bazaar, the Merchantman. One entry per video for both of these drawings. Just be a member or subscribe and comment with the secret word. And the secret word for this bid was what Paolo Soleri called his giant megastructures. Plus, we have, perhaps for not much longer, our Waiting for 3.18 piloting skills contest for the most amazing landing of a ship, Hercules size or larger. See the video in the description for that. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.